Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session here at CLON. We have the unique opportunity or the special circumstance that we're also recording an episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. So in this episode or in this conversation today, we're going to be talking about security. And is privacy or data privacy and security a priority today in your perspective? And what do we have to do to make it a priority? Got a wonderful cast of panelists here with me today. We're going to go around the horn and let them introduce themselves and talk about what their perspective is on privacy and why they think it should be a priority. I think I'm going to just go around clockwise on my screen, probably different than everybody else's, but we'll start with you, Myron, if that's okay.
That is A-okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm so excited to be a part of this conference and given the perspective. So Myron Grover, CEO of Surf Wisely. And regarding data privacy and security, do I think it's a priority today? Yes. Why? Because we're collecting more and more data today, more than ever. Everything's digital now. You think of email, everything that we're accessing, there's sensitive data stored there a lot of times than not. And so my perspective on it is you got to understand what type of data you are collecting and where it's stored to be able to put the security wrappers around it. And so, and then you get to understand the privacy laws that go with that hand in hand. So if you think of it in those three buckets, kind of where the data is, put the security wrappers around it, and then tie it into privacy as far as how you're sending it, where you're storing it, is it secure? And if people need access to it, you have the right security controls to disseminate that information.
Thank you very much. Next, I guess we'll go to you, Jennifer.
Hello, pleasure to be here. I'm really glad to be part of the ClassLink conference. I'm Jennifer Surjpur. I'm head of IT and digital at the Brit School in the UK, very far from where you all are at the moment. With my opinion, I'd like to say I think it's really important that we think about this and we have clear strategic plans within our organisation for privacy and data as well. I think as what Myron was saying and echoing what he's saying, data is becoming, we're using data and we're digitalised this more and more. So it's really important that we know whether we've got consent and whether the person, the stakeholders know how their data is being processed, where it's being stored and for what purpose it's being used for. I mean, in the UK, we have to align to the GDPR and it's important that we actually follow this as well.
Great. Well, welcome, Jennifer. And last but not least, Steve.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, and thanks for inviting me. I didn't realize what a nice talk radio show voice you have, Patrick, until you started introducing us. I don't know if that's a second career for you, but very nice. I'm Steve Smith, the Executive Director of Access for Learning. And previously, I was a school CIO and tech director for 27 years, most recently in Cambridge Public Schools, Cambridge, Massachusetts, for the last 17 years. And I say all that just to give a little perspective of where I'm coming from, and as someone embedded in a district level leadership position responsible for student data privacy and security. I just realized how there's still a lot of challenges for school districts in managing all of their data, where it's going to so many apps. And, I've been focused in this area for the past 15 years or so, trying to bring together vendors and school districts in coming to agreement on common expectations around both the legal obligations and security requirements to protect that data wherever it lives. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done, and I'm excited about this conversation today.
Great. Well, thank Thank you all for joining us here today. And I think I would probably kick off this conversation around the topic of balance. And when very often when we talk about data privacy and security, it becomes an issue of balancing the benefits and the cautions that we have to take against the value and the enhanced capabilities we can get from using technology. So I guess I would open the floor to the question, how can administrators and educators balance the need for privacy against the opportunities, including that of AI, for greater technology use in instruction? Anybody want to start particular, or do I call on somebody?
I'm quite happy to go ahead with this. I think in terms of the balancing side of things, it's really important that we educate our staff, our students as well, or whatever organisation you're in, to understand how their data can be used, or if they're using someone else's data using AI tools, what the implications are when they're actually using this tool, because they won't know this otherwise. It's going to be very difficult, and the ethical side of it, and whether or not the students have consented to this or not, of having their data being used by a third party. Also, following on, just thinking about the data itself, whenever we actually whenever we undertake having a new system, we always go through the data protection impact assessment, so we know where that data is being stored and it's transparent, in case anyone actually wants to see, okay, how is my data being stored, how is it being processed. We've got that on record, and making sure that we're annually reviewing it to make sure that the data being stored is where they say it's going to be stored, and so we have no hidden surprises in the time that we're living in, where we could get the ransomware cyber attack at any time. We need to know where those crown jewels are.
Right. Thank you.
I'll follow up on what Jennifer said, and especially the piece around educating your staff. And when I think about schools, in particular, the teachers, and so many tools being out there, oftentimes educators get really excited about the new tools and want to start using them right away, which understandably, right? They all bring great value. But awareness amongst the staff about why they should only be using tools that have been vetted and have been approved, is very important. It's often a harder part of this whole process, is changing the culture in a school district so that data privacy and security is top of mind for the educators, because it's naturally not top of mind for them. And one piece of being successful in changing that culture is, while you're building that awareness, is also putting in place processes and procedures that can streamline the process of the requesting for tools, the vetting of the tools, and getting them in the hands of the educators quickly, or that they can't use it because they've been turned down. So if that process is long and dragged out, they're less likely to even go through the process or request it. They're more likely to end around and start using the tools. So I think it's a combination of building the awareness and also building the process that's quick and easy to use to have applications vetted and approved.
Yeah, I'll piggyback Steve and Jennifer, kind of on that vendor due diligence piece. But as you looking at vendors where to they're going to have access to that critical data while you're doing that vendor due diligence, one of those, it's the right time to do it, is do it, you have your network diagram, but do a data flow diagram, because it's a clear picture that anybody that's even non-technical can see. How is my data flowing in and out of to these vendors? And so, and then as you look at that maybe on a yearly basis, and if you plug in a new vendor, you update that, right? But you can clearly see whether it's how the vendors intertwining to the school network, or how my employees or students are accessing that data. And then you can start putting, like, okay, it's being stored there. It's, at a data center, how long it's being retained there. And then you can, two, from time back to the vendor, then I need to make sure, right, if they're, to Steve's point, they need to be having the security controls holding them to the fire from the terms and conditions and SLAs to protect that data. So I would say the data flow diagram is another key component of it, because it visually allows you to see where it's moving around and where it's stored.
it brings an interesting point. Do we even know where this data is stored? You think about that a little bit and you question, do we know all the places where data is stored? And do we know who has access to it? And where it might be stored that we're not wanting it to be stored? Fascinating consideration when you really put a little time into it. I also would highlight a little bit. Steve mentioned processes and practices that make it easier. I do want to do a little shout out for Access for Learning and the Student Data Privacy Consortium, and Steve's heavy involvement in that, in an effort to simplify the process of agreeing to what can be shared and who can be shared with, because if it comes to navigating statutes on your own, it can be a pretty complex task. Am I right, Steve?
Yep, absolutely. So thanks for that, Patrick. Within Access for Learning is the Student Data Privacy Consortium, which I founded and grew out of my work in Cambridge. And really the cornerstone of the consortium and why it's grown so much is in fact bringing vendors and school districts together around those common expectations from a legal perspective in developing the National Data Privacy Agreement with a common set of clauses that do work across the country. So it gets to that streamlining piece that I talked about, that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for vendors and districts to work together with a common understanding of what those privacy obligations are by creating this one document that can be used across the country. It does also allow for the unique requirements in specific states, though, through exhibits. So it's, if a state has a unique student data privacy law, which many of them do, with unique requirements over and above what FERPA would require in the US, those be included in an Exhibit G. And this way, when vendors obtain these national data privacy agreements from districts around the country, it's the exact same instrument. And they can see right on the front page, oh, this is a standard NDPA, or this one's got an Exhibit G with California specific clauses or New York specific clauses. So it really has impacted the marketplace in the US to kind of streamline that process. And now starting to expand that idea into security controls as well, which we do about 2 minutes, perhaps.
So I would ask Jennifer to comment a little bit with GDPR. It's a little bit of a different creature, and then I think what I'd like to ask is, are the statutory requirements the bare minimum, or are they the goal you strive for? Because I think that there's a decision to be made by all parties there. So Jennifer, tell us a little more about GDPR.
So with the GDPR that we've got, we need to make sure that all of our policies reflect with GDPR. They align with the GDPR UK government guidelines as well. So that could be your admissions form. That's also your application forms. It's all your policies that you've got within the school. And again, it goes back to educating the staff and the students so they know about their rights, how their data is being used, and their digital footprint as well. That's really important, and that's aligned to GDPR, how it can actually affect them later on in their life as well. I think it's really an important factor there is how we're educating our staff and students regarding GDPR so they know about their data being processed.
Myron, your thoughts on this topic of statutory requirements, and is that the goal or is that the minimum threshold?
I wouldn't say it's a minimum. It's a goal that we need, you got to achieve and attain. You got to meet the minimum. So I like to use the term crawl, walk, run. That's where we're running, from that perspective, but we got to be doing the basics first, and then we're standing up, walking, and making sure, again, back to understanding where the data is. And then running is we're meeting GDPR, FERPA, all these regulations from that perspective.
We're talking about policies and practices that are really done at the school or the district or higher levels. But we all have education in our background. And I guess I'd throw a question out. Anybody who wants to can start with the answer here about what is it that educators can do to help their students understand the importance of protecting their own private data and practices that they should pursue. Myron, you want to start there?
Yeah, you gotta first you gotta train them, but you have to bring it down to their level. And so, a common thing when you talk about digital footprint, their information, a lot of that resolves around stuff like browsing safely online, social media, right? Because those are the two places I'm browsing, I'm on social media, and so you gotta put them step down to their level and say, hey, if I'm surfing online, which privacy settings should I be turning on or off so that we don't know once you put something out there, it's out there. So you gotta help them understand and show them if you don't do this, this is what's gonna happen. And so like Jennifer was saying, from you think of, hey, they might be in sixth grade elementary school, but a lot of times you put something out online or social media, who's looking at that? Future employers, your teachers, your coaches, law enforcement. So helping them understand who's looking at that data, but then, having that conversation and showing them through interactive activities, fun and engaging way, not just reading something, but putting it into real world examples that is impacting them. And I'll share this example as I share a lot of times it's in my where I show parents and schools is it's a mom that took a picture and she wanted to prove, and they wanted to prove that somebody could find where she took that picture was based on the landmarks behind her. And so the gentleman walked through all the landmarks and the process of just using Google and free stuff out there to pinpoint exactly where she was. And so that shows the points of training kids. Even something that's taking a picture and posting it on social media, you got to be mindful about what you're posting. So what you got to train them. You got to, and like the online gaming, showing them the different platforms that they're in, showing them the privacy settings, what to turn off and turn on, the mobile phones, the tablets, walking them through that. There's a lot of built-in free things that you can turn off and show, hey, it doesn't show my location, not making friends with people I don't know and stuff like that. And so you got to do that.
Yeah, so definitely when I'm thinking about teaching these students and thinking about what program we've got in place for these students, is it one of the school's priority as part of their citizenship or PSHE sessions that they've got? Are the staff able to educate the students about them? Do they know enough about how to check online for privacy settings? Because we can teach our students, that's fine, but we also need to make sure we're educating our staff. So is that part of our whole school or organisation's priorities as well? What have we done to educate them? Are we getting speakers in? Is there a digital literacy programme for staff and for students as part of the onboarding for both? What are we doing about that? I think that's really important.
Great. And Steve, when you were in district, I'm sure there were initiatives in Cambridge, and some of that had to flow through into the student data privacy agreement and what vendors are allowed or committing not to do in terms of sharing data.
Sure. And before I get into that, I just want to follow up on what Jennifer and Myron said. And that I just want to emphasize that what a huge lift it is for school districts to do what you just described for all students. um, to ensure that they really do understand where their data is going and how it's being used, and all those settings that you talked about, Myron and Jennifer. You calling out that the educators themselves need training before they can train the students, and it's a changing world so fast, right? And schools are already booked full with teaching all the other curriculum. To put on top of that digital citizenship is just really difficult. I also worry as parent of 30-some-year-olds that I saw go through this, that they're oblivious to it as much as I would speak to them about it. They're looking at the features of an app and not at all thinking about, what they're trading for it. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, these are all things we should be doing, but in reality, to do that in public schools today in the US for all students is, I would say is not happening, right? How do we do it? But through, what we can do is by vetting the apps, and like as Patrick was alluding to, having data privacy agreements in place that clearly say what the vendors can and can't do with the data, at least in the educational ecosystem, we are doing our best to ensure that that data is not being misused and it's only being used, to deliver those apps to the process. But of course, we're not doing that for the apps that when the kids walk out the door and turn on their smartphones. So
Well, and I think what comes out of this, what I'm hearing out of this is we have to have, it's a comprehensive training of the students. It's not just what we can do in the school district and with the apps that we use in education, but extended into social media, extended into the other activities that they're learning. And it's really more of a digital citizenship and an awareness of the privacy concerns that they will have in using any technology tools. And they might be safeguarded in the school, but it goes beyond.
Yeah.
I have to be a little bit mindful of time here, and I guess there's another question that I would ask close to the end here, and that is, what trends do you see? What's going to happen with the landscape here moving forward? And how is security going to evolve in education over the next 3 years, 5 years? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think I see, from a security perspective, obviously we see you could say incidents happen at schools affecting kids learning, from ransomware to phishing. I think you're gonna have to I think the trend I see is schools are gonna start assessing their cybersecurity posture. Like you gotta know what you don't know, right? And then you're gonna start seeing, hey, we're gonna build a blueprint for 1, 3, 5 years. Then based on resources and budget, we'll continue to mature and evolve. But the days of not say doing anything, those days are gone because you're just like sitting there and something's gonna happen. I use the terminology, right? Like we all physical security at our house, right? The bad guy's gonna come try to jiggle the door lock. If it jiggles, he's gonna then try to open it. So we gotta put those minimum controls in place to make it harder for them to move on. So that's what I see from schools making more investment, including this obviously training the staff and teachers as well.
and I'd just like to extend Myron's scenario to doing the same thing for all the online ed tech providers, right? Where the majority of student data probably is actually residing, not within our schools anymore. So how do we, much like we've done for the privacy requirements, the legal requirements of bringing everyone together with a common understanding, I would like to see the same thing happen for the security controls that are used by the ed tech marketplace. So we're all on the same page of what those expectations are. And I think we'll get there. We're just living through a period of evolution in this.
I think that we're going to really see a robust incident management plan from schools. That's going to be the norm, which wasn't the norm before. And this is just echoing what Myron and Steve has said as well, that cybersecurity is going to be tightened up with the incident management. How are they going to respond to a cybersecurity threat? And that's beforehand, we didn't have that as a necessity for schools to do. But now I think we're going to have that, where we're going to have to see a solid plan in place where they need to know where their crown jewels are kept. When we're thinking about our vendors as well and looking at our vendors, we're not going to give over the data unless we know how that's going to be protected if there is a ransomware event that goes on or not. So.
Oh, great. Well, I want to start by thanking all of you for your insight and real heartfelt contributions to this discussion. I think in summary, what we talked about is it's important to understand all the pieces, understand how they fit together. That's the first step in trying to address it. I think that there are guidelines. I hear people talking about guidelines and regulations. They're a good starting point, but we have to extend beyond that to the individuals that are involved, especially to the kids that are out there using it. And by teaching them more sooner, the better prepared they're going to be able to address this, because the prior generation is having to catch up as us older folks are as well. And then finally, it sounds like some of the efforts that have been put in place to streamline these processes and protect these privacy concerns will be extended, hopefully, and with greater controls. And the controls will be used to enforce many of these policies and practices that have come into place. So I think I've done a good job of capturing the quick thoughts that we had. It's a very quick session. I appreciate all of the attendees for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please also look up Perspectives Finding Common Ground as a podcast. We do this on a monthly basis with EdTech topics and multiple perspectives and finding ways that we can work on things together. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.